You know, sometimes you get into a game and think, this can't be that entertaining. But then when you start playing it, it turns out to be pretty engrossing and interesting. And it just keeps going. You don't know when you can stop. You just want to keep playing and you just can't stop. Honestly, this is one of those games. Frostpunk was created by 11-bit studios, and it is a mix of city building and survival gameplay. It's had me pretty sucked in since I played it back in last year, I mean. It's set in an alternate 1886 where the sun has begun to dim, and as a result of this, the earth has slowly gotten colder and colder to the point where most cities are no longer livable and people are looking for another place to live. You take control as leader of a group of survivors heading towards a special generator developed in order to survive the harsh environment, located in a crater that will protect you from the harsh winds. The generator itself is an interesting idea, but we'll get into that later. Before we get further in, I'll say this. This game is intended to be difficult at first. It wants you to take your time and learn. You are not going to succeed at managing a city at first, even if you've played city building games before. And for this review, it's going to show a mix of the campaign, well, one of the campaigns that you can access, and a mix of the game's survival mode. Set to an easier mode for that, because I wanted a fair amount of footage, okay? Frostpunk uses a mix of resource management and temperature control to create a mix of city building and survival gameplay. In order to ensure a city can survive in the world's harsh climate, you need to keep supplies well stocked and plan a city that doesn't function like an absolute mess. Seriously, making districts is a good way to handle this. It'll help you out way more than you think. Trust me. The city building is honestly what can make and break you in Frostpunk. If you don't plan ahead and consider where your buildings go, you'll likely end up wasting so much space that it ends up slowing you down and hurting you in the long run. Which is why I recommend the idea of districts. Having something like a residential district, a food district, a medical district, all set up over time can really help, because it lets you just keep in mind, don't put stuff there, don't put stuff there, put it over there. That way your city doesn't look like an absolute mess, and it doesn't end up killing you. On top of this, you have other things to take care of. You've got scouting you can do to find supplies and survivors, you've got laws and special buildings you can make, which can have adverse effects, but it depends on when you use them, really. When I say smaller mechanics, I mean things that are normally done over the course of the whole game, and not requiring a lot of time spent on them outside of managing the workers you send to them, as workers take care of things automatically once they're sent to these buildings. Resources all have buildings that can be used to attain them over the course of the game, along with resource piles that you start with in order to get off on a good footing. So the resources themselves are pretty simple. Coal is obvious, you need that for the generator. Anything that provides heat needs coal, and if you don't have that, everybody's going to freeze and die. So it's important to have a constant source of coal going. Things like coal mines, coal pumpers, and there are coal piles, but those aren't going to last long. Coal pumpers themselves are surprisingly effective if you have the right people set to it. Next on that list is wood, and it's mostly used for research and buildings. Wood can also serve as a form of coal production, as you can burn it, but you need to research a specific building for that, and it will slow how much wood you get over time since it is constantly using it. And that's honestly about as much as wood gets used for. Really, it's not that much. Same with metal. I will say I wish metal was a little easier to get because it's a bit slow to obtain in the ways it's intended. But metal is mostly used for buildings and research anyway, so I guess that's fair. Then again, it is used for some other things, but that's later on in the game. But you don't have to worry about that, usually, unless you have a bit of a medical problem. I ain't explaining. And then, of course, you've got what is effectively the second most important resource, because you need to eat as well, and yeah, you would think eating is the most important, but no, you need to stay warm first. Food itself is in two types. You've got raw food, which you shouldn't really eat, but your civilians will eat it if they don't have any rations. And then of course you've got the meals, which is made into rations. You can have different types if you're willing to put in laws. And food itself is something that, depending on how you plan your city, can really hurt you or just be something you don't have to worry about, because you've got people working around the clock keeping it fine. And then there was one more resource that you have to worry about, which is steam cores. These are rare and you can usually only find them by exploring the vast snowfields that are above you. They're used for special buildings, special units, and all in all will make your city much more productive than a normal building would. They're also a pain to get sometimes, since some areas require you to expend them, mostly in Endless Stone, so you don't have to worry about that in the campaign. Now, alongside managing resources and building your city, you'll have to enact laws and various other things. Laws themselves have big ramifications with them. Something as simple as saying, in case of emergencies, a 24-hour shift can be put in effect. Immediately after putting that in, people will get pissed at you. And whenever you use it, people get really pissed, and it's right for them to do so. At the same time, you're in a freaking, negative 40 degrees Celsius city. What else do you want? People need to stay warm, we need that coal. It lays into the main mechanic that stops you from just trying to be a straight-up dictator right off the bat. And that's the mix of the discontent system and the hope system. The more things you do that piss people off, the more discontent they get, obviously, and if that raises too high, they will actively attempt to cut you off from being the leader of the city, and as a result, you usually get a chance to try and redeem yourself, but if you don't, you're screwed. Simple as that. It depends when it happens, but you can also get steamed. I'm just saying that right now. As for the hope mechanic itself, when hope is really low, you do stand the risk of people losing hope in that you will be able to keep the city going, and they will choose to leave in hopes that they'll find somewhere better. But usually hope is something that's easier to keep up in high spirits, especially when you get further into the laws and you start enacting things with the other two law trees you could choose between. One is based on order, one is based on faith and religion. Both have their benefits, I'll say that. Both also kinda end in the same way, well, at least mechanically. Visually and in terms of their tone and theme, they are completely different. But both have their benefits. You know, order helps produce better workers in a more straight way by just having foremen and people keeping an eye on things. While in terms of faith, it's more just a general happiness and very high hope is always going to be there because people are always putting their faith in things. That, and it also has a snooping thing in the faith system. It's a lot to get in. It's a lot to talk about. And all of these mechanics, they tie in together. They create a system where you are just focusing on making sure everything's working in order. And when it is, you feel so proud of yourself. And in that one endless game you're doing so well in, a freaking random event happens, makes your steam core buildings do 10% as well as they would do, and it just completely ruins you because you can't keep up with the coal production. You need to constantly use the overdrive on the freaking generator because you need to keep that heat going, and everybody's complaining, and then the overdrive's about to make the generator go critical, and the critical generator is going to freaking explode, but you don't have any steam cores to stop it from going boom, so you have the choice of let it go boom or just put a freaking kid in there because they're the only ones small enough to fix the fucking thing, and then oh god, everything's fucking gone. Yeah, it's one of those games where everything can go to hell pretty quick. And this can vary. I'm mostly talking about Endless here. It does change a fair bit in the campaign maps. Each one has their own objectives and all that, and they do have some different research options depending on the campaign you're on. And in the end, it becomes an emotional mess sometimes. Seriously. Ugh. Freaking little Timmy had to go down that well. The game's focus on an extremely serious take on this situation is very good, and I'm glad they didn't try and do something stupid like try and make it silly, because we all know that would not be handled well. It would be a mess. The themes of survival and the whole concept of the world constantly getting colder and colder, it just wouldn't work in a less serious setting. And some of the situations where choices have to be made, you will never have situations where, regardless of the choice you make, something positive happens. Something as simple as finding survivors. The best situation is stopping your scouts from doing their job and leading them back to your city safely. That's the least punishing thing I can think of off the top of my head, because if you choose not to do that, they can find their way. They'll also likely die. Death is a common thing in this game. One of the earliest laws you can put into effect is to make a cemetery, or to just say, screw it, let's just dig a hole and just put the bodies in there. We can use the bodies later. It's so cold, they're not going to decay. And people get pissed at you for that. It makes sense. But sacrifices have to be made. It makes sense as well because there's freaking child laws you can put into effect. You could say, okay, this world is cruel, let's not make it cruel for the children. Let's make child shelters. People are happy about that. Or you could say, we need all the able hands, and okay, we'll only make them do jobs we deem are safe. And depending on which law you pick, you can either make them be like, okay, the child shelter stuff, that leads into laws that can give you engineer apprentices or medical apprentices, which is handy. If you choose the other one, you can just say, fuck it, the children can do all jobs. And then everybody gets really pissed at you, which is really, really a good thing to see. People getting pissed. Like, heck, I'm the one making these laws and these saves. I'm the one that's like, I don't want to do this, but it's one of those situations where you have to. As for other parts of the game, such as graphics, music, and all of that, I'll say visually is very well done. Everything looks pretty good, everything has its own look to it. I will say I feel like the number of NPC models that were made could have been increased over time, because the game has been giving updates to content. The game has been getting content updates over time, and honestly I have seen the same NPC model wandering around the streets so much. I know it's cold and all, so they're probably all wearing a lot of stuff, so you don't really see much of a difference, but still, it's kind of one of those things that's going on in my head that could be altered a little bit. Music, on the other hand, I'll say the music that is there is pretty good. It captures the tone of the situation the survivors are in, and when things get bad, the tone is much well executed in the music. I do feel like there could be a little bit more in the music, not in like the tone, but just how much there is. I swear I've heard the same tracks a few times too many in my playtime. And it would be nice... Now this is just me suggesting something silly. Well, silly in the sense that it's not clearly going to be necessary. Now there is a law that allows you to build public houses, which are effectively pubs, restaurants, that kind of thing. And one thing I kind of don't like is that when these places are open, you don't hear anything coming out of them apart from the usual chatter of the civilians. It would be nice if you could hear like some happy bar music or something like that coming out of those buildings. I understand it's a silly thing to ask, but it would have helped the immersion in my opinion. As for what Frostpunk has coming for it now, it's had a lot of free content updates since it came out, adding a lot of things people wanted, and recently they announced a season pass effectively, because they wanted to make a few DLCs that are paid and will expand upon things in the game. One of those is out already. I don't own it, so I'm afraid I can't say anything about it. But they also have a couple more planned, and each one has its own kind of size and expectation it wants to give. So the game has a lot of life in it still. It's clearly going to be going for a while. And the past content updates themselves honestly would have solidified that. They gave what people wanted and everybody's happy. As for me, I understand that this video was a little bit... no. As for me, I'm just going to say thanks for watching. I know if some things I say sound a little bit here and there. As for me, I'm just going to say thanks for watching. I'm going to go manage my city some more before the kid jumps down the freaking generator shaft again. Timmy, get out of there!